Welcome to the Black Paper. My name is Ndukwe Onoha.
And I'm Cheta Wanze.
Cheta, I'm sure you're still on a high after yesterday's match between. Should we stop calling them Baba Eagles and just give them
No.
some
When they win
respect?
the whole thing, then they become super again.
Oh, okay, all right. So let me not get
For
to.
now, it's still Baba Eagles. Don't forget that they did not qualify for the World Cup, so they've left
Well,
us. They've left us in a situation where we have to support the Three Lions and hope that they don't become the Three Pussycats.
I mean, let's see what happens. But it's been interesting. I think for me, two things that have really stood out for me. One was the Lumumba VEA, the super farm from Congo, who has
From the DRC.
in his own way has reminded not just Africa but the world about that Pan-African giant called Patrice Lumumba, and hopefully
I think the
has
more
made people.
interesting thing will be if Nigeria's appeal fails. Nigeria is appealing the match, the result against the DRC at FIFA. And in all honesty, I think the appeal will fail. I think it's bad sportsmanship, but hey, if FIFA suddenly rules in favor of Nigeria, we'll all happily support the team. But if it would be interesting from my point of view, if Nigeria's appeals fails and the DRC, because no, they have not yet qualified, they still have this small matter of intercontinental playoffs. But if that happens and they go through, they succeed and qualify, it will not be out of brand for the Trump crew to refuse that guy a visa.
Of course. And but what I loved about his decision after the match was the very disrespectful gimmick by that Algerian player on the field.
Well, to be fair to the Algerian player, he has apologized.
Yeah, he apologized. He's good. Everybody's trying to kiss and make up, but I love the fact that the guy refused their 2,000 euros a match and just say, you know what, I'm just going to go back to my country, because it sort of like plays into the conversation we're having, in my mind anyway, plays into the conversation we had earlier about Africans, in quotes, not respecting ourselves. And that was because I shared with you that video of African soldiers fighting in Russia, and a Russian was heard saying that these guys were dispensable. And it's just that thing of, it's always, and it's interesting, I'm saying African as if Algerians are not Africans, even if they say they are or not. But there's always that thing of Black Africans.
So
there's always.
Well, okay. Sorry to have interrupted you.
No,
that's
but there's that thing of Black Africans.
FA took it very seriously. They issued an apology. They called the guy to his stadium, and they pointed out something the Algerians had a brutal history with colonialism as well. So they
Patrice Lumumba and DRC stood up for them.
Yep. So they were appalled. We have to be fair to the Algerian FA. Bottom line is what's happened on the part of the player, and I don't know why I keep forgetting his name, but he was one of those Algeria has about the second highest, and my friend Yomi Kazim actually did a piece about it that I read in passing today. I'll dig into the data later on. Algeria, many of the African teams have a high number of players born abroad, and that particular player was born abroad, born and raised abroad, so he's not as cognizant with the history. So his elders in the Algerian FA have told him the history.
Yeah.
So I think this is one of the things that we of African heritage in the diaspora also need. So that's a failure of quote unquote his parents, in the sense that they didn't, make him aware of the history. He was just mocking the guy. It wasn't a mad. So there may have been some malice, but it was that kind of thing and we've all seen it in football. Somebody wins a match and then goes overboard, football has a way of making people get carried away. So where there would have been a problem is if the Algerian FA had not done right.
Yeah.
But they did right. So
Well,
yeah, and I think
I'll give
that's the
you.
most important. It's kind of like, I mean, I read an article when in Nigeria's round of 16 match, Victor Osimhen and Ademola Lookman had an altercation on field. A lot of Nigerians were going, and I'm like, see, we have this habit of focusing on the unimportant things. The altercation was in the heat of the moment. Osimhen is an extremely passionate player, and I have seen videos of, for example, Scott Palmer in Chelsea, berating his teammates. That can exactly what Victor Osimhen did. So football especially, but sports in general, has a way of becoming very emotional. I mean, growing up in Benin in the 1980s, I know of men who would, and I'm not justifying that behavior in particular, but I know of men who would beat their wives if their team lost.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, there was a brand in South Africa that actually, I think it was an alcohol brand that did a campaign around this because domestic violence increased. But it's not just South Africa, even here in the UK, there's stats that show that domestic violence increases
We actually have
with
SVM
football.
Intelligence actually has incidental data from various parts of West Africa that shows, because we tried to do it. There was a project that's a Nigerian NGO, TechHa, approached us to gather some data from. So we had done some desk research and pre-field work, data gathering before Daddy Trump threw US aid into tailspin, and that affected all sorts of
Daddy
NGO
Trump.
projects. Now, one thing that we found from that data that we gathered was that there's a lot of domestic violence happens after sports games, especially football. So again, not to justify, just to explain that what's happened with the Algerian player, what's happened with Victor Osimhen and Ademola Lookman is the kind of thing. I mean, just a few minutes ago, the Inter Milan versus Napoli Serie A game, the coach of Napoli, Antonio Conte, was sent off by the ref for saying something, and going what people lose their heads during football. I am not saying it is right. I'm just saying it happens.
True. Well, to bring it back to that, I was very, very happy though to see Akol Adams and his own
The Nigerian
celebration.
player, for those who don't know.
Yeah, the Nigerian player, honoring not
Lumumba.
just Lumumba, but also I'll say Lumumba VEA. But there's a wider context here that we need to really harp on, and you mentioned it earlier, and that is the need for us, we being parents now, and also people in our community, to remind, especially now that we are all here, to remind people of our history, because there's a tendency that we get sucked in, especially now that the politics is telling us, oh, you must become very British, you must prove your Britishness, you must prove that you're part of this community. And the easy thing to do would be to say, well, you know what, I'm going to live for a while, my history, my identity aside. But what happens is that a while becomes a lifetime. And then your children grow up not understanding the intricacies, the nuances that shape your worldview and your thinking. And things like this happen where in mocking a player, it becomes a national outcry.
Well said. Well said.
But anyway, away from football, because I know that Cheta, otherwise you'll dwell on it.
There's a reason why
Today,
it's called the beautiful game, young man.
today we want to talk about, well, two main topics. The first will be the conversation going on now about the possible, or the idea to ban under-16s in the UK from social media, and in the second half we'll talk about the Renters' Right Act. Is an act that has become law, and what it means for people. So, to starting with the proposal to ban under-16s from social media. Now, in On December 10th, 2005, following a long campaign for this, Anthony Albanese, who's the Prime Minister of
If the
sorry,
page is showing.
Lord. December 10, 2025, Australia, following the PM's campaign to ban under-16s from social media, Australia brought that law into effect. So now in Australia, if you're 16 and under, your social media accounts have been shut down. And that, as things like this are wont to, ignited a round of conversations in the UK with politicians, especially the Conservatives, now making a pledge that if they get back into power, they will ban under-16s from social media. It's we have to note that in the 2024 general election, the Conservative manifesto, in their manifesto, they did hint at a possible ban of social media if you're under 16. So there's been some sort of consistency, but now Kemi Badenoch has said she will definitely go forward with that. Labour, on the other hand, has been a bit reluctant to say yes, we will ban under-16s from social media. What Labour has said is, well, we have the Online Safety Act that stops young people from being exposed to harmful content. So now we're in a place
Well,
where
I think that the recent shenanigans with Grok will show that there's only so far the Online Safety Act can go.
Yes, and an interesting thing is, I mean, there's been reports and leaked messages of Labour ministers urging and MPs urging the party and the government to stop posting on X, on Twitter. But the question is, should there be a ban rather than just say, look, we're not going to use this platform, or rather than say, well, we're going to have to use age verification, what the government is doing, to stop people from being exposed to harmful content. Now, the problem is, in any instance, if you were to use a VPN, that's, you already bypass, but I'm sure we'll get to that. However, the first thing, Cheta, is looking at the idea of banning under-16s from using social media. What will get your vote?
You already know the answer. I don't know why you're asking. Okay, yes,
Well,
I would definitely come down
our
on
listeners
them.
don't know.
I would definitely come down on them with a big stick. I mean, I listened to Kemi Badenoch on
Laura
the Laura
Kilsberg.
Kolsberg show today, and I was just nodding my head like an Agama lizard as she was talking, because I agreed with all of her points on the issue.
Sorry to Cheta, do you know, I sat there, I was saying to myself, bloody hell, I am actually agreeing with this woman. Never thought that would happen, but carry on.
Well, as you know, on quite a number of issues, I agree with her.
Yes. You're the Tory here.
So basically, I think that social media has opened the door to the worst human impulses generally. And when you consider young kids, young kids, one of the fundamental things that a lot of young children do not have is restraints. I mean, and that's natural. So you have, and it's hard enough. The example that Kemi gave of her kids, it's actually a very, very good example, and one that I completely identify with. So in order to, a bit of background about myself at the risk of centering myself in this. I have a tech background. Before I went into first journalism and then research, my first life, in my earlier life, I was an IT engineer, and I have a passion for Linux as an operating system. So I find that when I was having problems with, because another thing that I complain about here is that the schools for the kids are too screen heavy. All their homework is online, all of that kind of stuff. So you can't even say, okay, let me take away their laptops or their tablets for so and so time. They need, for them to actually function in school, they need those devices. So what I did eventually, my solution was to take both their laptops, blow away Windows, and then put Linux on them. And then I worked on the etc init files so that
Okay, please break in English.
Yes, it's English I'm speaking. So that it basically, I created an access list. So certain sites do not come on at certain times of the day. Certain sites come on, that kind of stuff. Basically, restrictive use of
You see,
those. And even at that, there was an unintended effect. My kids have learned how to go around Linux. You understand? So I still have to be watching, that kind of stuff. Basically, like a hawk. It's tough. It is tough. So one of the things that I noticed with the Online Safety Act is that I use VPNs a lot because I travel quite a fair bit. One of the things that I noticed with the Online Safety Act since it came into force is that your VPN, once you try to connect to a public Wi-Fi in the UK, your VPN will not work. That's something that is happening at basically the application level, the network level, which I think is a decent enough thing. And it's that kind of weight that needs to be brought to bear on social media. There's a lot of now. I find it very interesting that a lot of the chatter, for example, about this Grok thing. If you watch Talk TV, there's this lady, Alex, I've forgotten her surname, Alex, who was basically trying to reel into the government. Why should they ban Grok? Twitter, that kind of stuff. After the whole scandal of people undressing ladies with Grok. So I found it refreshing to hear Kemi speak today. Kemi is speaking like a mother who does not want her children to go astray. And I'm completely in that camp. Now, there are three things, basically three large pins that are talking points for me in this thing. Now, some people will say, "Oh, let us try and adopt the whole digital village approach. Where we come from, it takes a village to raise a child." But the truth is, even in our environment, in our home environment, the village raising a child thing is going out the window. That's a basic fact.
True.
We are becoming more individualistic. I don't think that will work. I think that the government has to step in. And yes, I understand complaints about the whole nanny state thing, but man, that's BS as far as I'm concerned. Right now, the key thing is protecting the kids. The second point for me is radicalization. And I have just one name to bring up, Shemama Begum.
Mm-hmm.
When children and you have to consider the structure of the modern economy. First things first, unless you have a shit ton of money somewhere, daddy and mommy have to work. So daddy and mommy, especially in this, so take me as an example. Okay, let's take you. You are a politician. You still have something that you do by day. Your wife works in the NHS. You people have to go out.
Not NHS, local authority, but yeah.
Okay, local authority. People have to go out. So at some point, there will be gaps where the kids will be quote unquote on their own. And those gaps is not necessary that you may be physically present in the house, but you can't spend your entire waking hours.
Sometimes you just want to wind down. Sometimes you just want to be on your own.
You can't spend your entire waking hours standing behind them and the computer, especially when you consider that both my kids have computers. Because they come back from school, one of my first things that we insist, go and check for your homework, that kind of stuff. They check for their homework, they do their homework, and then before you know it, they've done their homework, and then they go down the rabbit hole. I have a meeting. Mommy has a meeting. One of these things, maybe mommy has to go into the office because mommy works hybrid. Then I have meetings. Oh, let's assume mommy is working hybrid, then I have to go off to, last year I was in 6 countries. I have to go off to wherever I have to go off to. You understand? who is going to spend all the time standing over them? Unless we import grandma. Do you understand? And even grandma
and they
will
will
not
run
spend
rings.
all
They
her
will
time.
run rings
They will
around
run
grandma.
rings around grandma. So,
No,
so that doesn't work. Again, Shemima Begum got radicalized on the precursor of today's social media. And what is happening on today's social media is a lot
is
worse.
No, but
Then,
even sorry, before you go to the third point, before the radicalization, an even more disturbing angle is grooming. And you can say yes, you can, but you have pedophiles who go on sites like Roblox, who go on sites like Discord, who are chatting with these children as if they are their age mates, and before you
yes.
know it, they are creating games where
It's so
where they're being taught
so
how to commit sexual acts on each other. It's
yeah. To use our own to use our language from back in Nigeria, that's the grooming and radicalization. And I say Papa born two of them. Basically, it's adults taking advantage of vulnerable groups, in this case kids, and then getting them to do what they ought not to do. And that is online. Then the third point is that so basically there's age verification, there's a trust deficit. And there's a perfect example that Kemi used today. Even when there was a physical ban, or when there has been a physical ban on things like alcohol, people will still take, or some people would make fake IDs. So you can't rule out that will happen. But nevertheless, those kind of things tend to be the more is extreme the right word, the more badly behaved people, as it were. Basically, for the most part, if you have a ban, most people will end up conforming. They may not be too happy about it, but over and above, I think society will be better. And again, I want to actually take this even going further. Because for the health of society, there has to be some form of regulation of this. And I know how I'm sounding. Some people are going to accuse me of being dictatorial, Soviets,
no,
that kind of stuff.
but you know,
It
Cheta,
is impossible.
we've already established you're the Grinch on this
See, this is
podcast.
not about being the Grinch. It is impossible from my point of view to separate the frame of Western societies from the fact that people no longer watch the same, no longer think in the same way. Now, there has to be room for. Wait. Let me land. Maybe I didn't. I'm not a lawyer. Maybe I didn't say it elegantly. But when I was finally convinced that America is in real trouble. So I landed.
When Mam Danny won in New York.
No. It was last year. I landed in Houston. Pardon me?
As I joke, by the way, but carry on.
Okay. I landed in Houston. Now, my strategy for adjusting to time zone whenever I land in the United States is typically most flights from this time zone land in the US in the afternoon. That's how I've always landed. I don't think I've ever landed in the US from outside the US in the early morning or in the evening. Okay, no, once dealt United from Lagos to Houston, but that's beside the point. Bottom line is, I landed in the afternoon, and my typical strategy is when I land, I get to my hotel. Even though I'm tired and jet lagged, I stay awake until about 9 p.m. Then I sleep. So by the time I wake up the next morning, I've slept off the jet lag and I've time zone adjusted. So usually when I to fill in the time, I watch the news. And as is usual, as I started doing from the 2016 election cycle in that country, I watch news from the right and the left. So the day I landed in Houston was the day Joe Biden's cancer diagnosis was announced. And I watched 4 channels in quick succession. First, Newsmax, then Fox, then CNN, then MSNBC. For something as simple as a fact, an old man has been diagnosed with cancer, you heard completely different things on each of these 4 channels. If you cannot agree on basic facts, society cannot move with one voice. That is mainstream media. The fragmentation is even worse on social media.
And it's
So
led by the algorithm, isn't it? So it keeps
it's led
feeding
because
you.
the algorithms are optimized, especially Twitter. The algorithm is optimized to make people angry because it is that anger that keeps people scrolling and clicking.
So
So
I'll give sorry,
essentially,
Chester, I'll give you an example. 2 days ago, I look up this Patrice VEA, or no, maybe 3 days ago, look up Patrice VEA thing, and since then, for some weird reason, all I've been getting is French content. You know, and I'm like, I looked up just 2-3 tweets on Lumumba, and that's almost all I'm getting now. You know, so it's that thing of the algorithm not just showing you what you're searching for, but then deciding on its own that this is something you want to keep seeing, and then trying to force feed you content that is tailor made to either, or to especially gather some sort of, get some emotion out of you. And that again is just what the news has become, and that is the danger to excitable 16-year-olds and under.
excitable 12-year-olds, excitable
Yeah.
10-year-olds. So exactly, you've hit the nail on the head. Basically, the algorithm keeps feeding you. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, or let's put it better, a vicious cycle. So you have a 16-year-old, not even 16, a 10-year-old basically has decided to watch. You mentioned Roblox, and then there's something that kids nowadays do which annoys me, but hey, I used to really worry about it with my kids. Then I found that it's not just my kids. They watch other people playing games. So it's always I'm always a bit annoyed. Like in my time, we used to watch we used to watch we used to play games by ourselves. Now you sit down watching other people. But what I noticed, the algorithm keeps feeding them more and more of people playing
No,
games.
see, Cheta, I had to shut that down, because for me, it wasn't so much that
So
they
you
went.
liberal, you shut something down.
Oh no, I'll tell you, my kids don't have phones. So I'm supposed to be the liberal, but you're even more liberal than I am. They don't have phones, you know, because I say,
I
look,
didn't say my
I
kids have phones.
okay, no,
Okay,
well, at least they have.
well, one of them has a phone now, in secondary school, but it's because secondary school.
My
And
brother,
again,
their
no,
secondary school is down from the house. I
it,
know where you are at every time. If
it
anything
gives
happens to school, call me.
it brings me to another point that I agreed with Kemi. One of the things that you are afraid of as a parent is your kids being left behind.
Mm,
So
definitely.
yeah, so you don't want a situation where you deprive them of stuff and then they become socially awkward as a result.
Oh, and I agree. So so with my kids, there's a phone. I have a spare phone. They have their friends and everything. Yeah, chat with them. But I'm not even going to police you on that. However, I'm not going to give the opportunity where, at least 18, 20 hours out of a 24-hour day, you have your head on that phone, because it doesn't help
Yeah.
anyone.
Yeah,
And the
the
thing with the
workaround
game,
I had is for the kid with the phone.
mm,
The phone is the school has a rule when they get to school,
they drop
lock
the
the phone
phone.
in the locker.
Yeah,
Yeah, lock the phone in the locker. So your phone goes with you when you're going to school. When you get back home, oh yeah, hand it over. When you're going to school again, if you are going out, so we've begun to send that kid on small errands. Or go down to the local Sainsbury's or a local co-op and buy something. Places that can either ride
yeah,
to or walk to. So, those little things to
yeah.
try and establish. So, if you are going to such a thing, here's your
Go
phone
with the phone. Oh
so that
yeah.
we can
So
track you.
they use my spare.
But
So my
to
spare phone is
sit
our
down,
phone.
yeah, to sit down and just be playing on the phone, mba, It's
No.
not. That's not happening.
It-
That's
so,
the
but
workaround.
it's little thing. But just before we go on the break, because we've sort of like spent a long time trying to
Establish that we both agree with the idea of a ban.
but I definitely do. But it's also quite
Being a
interesting that
parent overrules your liberal instincts. I love this.
but the interesting thing though is that the one party that had made a thing of protect our women, our children, children this, children that, suddenly have found themselves being against a ban completely. And that is
Because
your
at the
friend
end of the
Nigel
day,
Farage.
and the Igbo language says it very well. So for the non-Igbo speakers, loosely translated to English, follow the money. It's because of
Follow.
the it's all
It's
about
because
the
of
Benjamins.
and
So
and it
basically, the
yeah,
big tech guys are sponsoring reform.
of course, yeah.
So reform is not
But
going to say anything against them.
the other interesting thing is because now uh, we started with the separation of the church and state as a rule, but now we have a convergence of tech and state, especially in the US. And the one area of concern, or I suspect that it to be one area of the government's concern as well, is when you think of the fact that all these social media companies are all US owned, at least the large ones, and you have Trump going on about freedom of speech, you have Musk going on about freedom of speech. It almost seems that um by not having its own tech, uh not atmosphere, but not having its own tech ecosystem. The UK on one hand
The
is
EU generally.
the EU, yeah, is being held over a barrel by the US and their tech oligarchs, as I like to call them. And so, does that would that be the reason why governments are a bit skeptical about enforcing a blanket ban, or and that's one, and two, will the EU start thinking a bit more like China and say, you know what, we're going to create our own, like WeChat is a whole ecosystem on its own. We're going to try and create our own social media ecosystem, because right now with things like when you look at NATO and defense, when you look at even Ukraine that is in Europe, its fate has been decided one way or the other by the US. And now you're looking at tech, you're looking at AI, you're looking at the blowback that will come economically as well as people like Musk trying to use Twitter to uh, to defenestrate the government. Does the UK and does the EU need to need to start thinking about creating their own tech ecosystem to get some sort of independence?
So the founder of Huawei, Meng Shengwei, said something very interesting. I think it was about 15, 20 years ago. That's basically that sovereignty. If you don't have your own tech sovereignty in the modern world, you don't have sovereignty at all. And that's what the Europeans, including the British, are beginning to find out. The Chinese have tech sovereignty. The Indians are rushing to try to create their own. But countries in the Western alliances, the EU, Japan, South Korea has it to some level, but not as deep, because Samsung is quite independent. So, but the EU especially, the EU and the UK especially, completely surrendered themselves. Remember, this was under Biden. Contracts were signed with Huawei for the
5G.
for 5G, and the Americans basically threw the toys out of the pram. And you found all the Europeans beginning to back off, even though demonstrably the Chinese tech was better. So, and this, when you have to take into account that all of this happened even though under Obama, but Snowden proved conclusively that the Americans were spying on all the Europeans. So it's a larger geopolitical talk that is beyond the scope of this episode. Europe needs to do something about its digital sovereignty. If they don't, they would forgive the language. If they don't, they will remain America's bitch for a very long time.
We'll talk to the producer about your indiscriminate use of foul language, Cheta.
Now you know.
Foul language. But let's go for a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the renters rights act. And welcome back to the Black Paper. My name is Ndukwe Onoha.
And I'm Cheta Wanze.
So, Cheta, in the first episode, we spoke about just how...
First episode.
Oh my goodness, this always happens, doesn't it? In the first half, we spoke about how when it comes to tech and the kids, we sort of like swapped our liberal and conservative instincts. While
liberal?
Well, my liberal instincts with your conservative instincts. So you were
we didn't
much
swap.
more.
You came over to my side of the territory.
No, but you were much more liberal with the gadgets, and I'm just shutting everything down. But now we want to talk about
bring your kids' computers. I would help you upgrade them from Windows to Linux, yeah? And then put the required access lists, and then maybe do a tutorial for you on how to manage.
Now that sounds fab. Two Christmases ago, I got them some puzzles and the not crosswords, the Sudoku, and the rest. Like, sit down there and do that.
No, we do Scrabble actually.
Oh, that's cool.
And they like it actually. So the one that I want to start doing as soon as I can is dictating to them, getting them to write, because that's a skill that everybody's losing, to be honest.
Even my handwriting is getting terrible.
My handwriting is worse than the doctor's handwriting.
You know what we should get at? You should get them drafts. Get them and say, look, play proper strategy game.
So then we'll have to put a mango tree at the back of my house.
Mom.
Because draft is best played under the mango tree with my uncle.
But now we want to talk about the Renters' Rights Act. According to government sources, there are about 11 million renters in the UK, and these renters are at any given time at the mercy of their landlords, and who can, until now, throw them out of their house for any reason. The Labour government has then come to say, look, we want to put a stop to that, and recently has passed the Renters' Rights Act into law, and to come into effect from 1st of May 2026. And one of the biggest things it does is to stop Section 21 notices, or end that, which is no fault eviction. The landlord wakes up, doesn't like your face, decides, you know what, chuck you out, get someone else who can pay higher rent. So the is, as usual, as these things are wont to, they've received mixed reviews from people hailing it as a good deterrent and against impunity of landlords, and also protecting basic rights of renters. But of course, you will also have those who see it as a almost like, again, the government trying to tell businesses or people how to run their businesses. So there's always going to be that tension. But the thing is, I can tell you, Cheta, as a councillor here in Derby, I know how many times I've had to get dragged into issues of landlords just behaving badly. Someone goes to their landlord, says, look, there's mold on my wall, and this was here, this hasn't been cleaned up. Next thing, the landlord is telling you, right, off you go. Or, excuse me, someone goes into an apartment, they see a picture of some apartment, and they make the mistake of not going to actually view the house, then go in and see that what they saw, that meme, what I saw versus what I bought. They get in there and it's something completely new, but somehow they've been they're now locked into a contract. And in fact, that is another key feature of this new Renters' Rights Act. It makes the contract a rolling monthly contract, and when renters want to get out of it, they have to give 2 months notice, rather than what you have now, where you're locked into. If you have a fair or a nice landlord, it can be 6 months, but typically to be 12 months contract where you're locked in, and you can't do anything until the expiration of that date. So, Cheta, what's your thoughts been on what have your thoughts been on these Renters' Right Act? Because I know that you were very, very keen to talk about it. You've managed to mute. Are you on mute? How did that happen?
Yes, sorry, I was mute. Um, so there's a housing crisis in the UK. And I think that from our viewpoint, from the viewpoint of the African community, it's not just an economic crisis, it's also a community cohesion crisis. When you are locked into systems where you are where you are forced to settle for less, or you live in a precarious situation, you cannot settle. And when you don't settle, the chances of you integrating become very low. Now, there's a nuance in terms of home ownership. Um, Black Africans and Black Caribbeans in the UK have some of the lowest home ownership rates, which means that the most people in our community are locked in rentals. And because of that, they are at the receiving end of some of these bad practices. So I would like to look at the Renters' Rights Act as a civil rights legislation as well. And I think it's a very, very important one. Now, the ban on no-fault evictions is critical because many minority families are more likely to be renters, as I have said, and the stability that this ban will bring will enable people to stay in one place and enable their children to build roots, and as a result will help integration. It's one of the ironies that Reform, as an example, the people that you love to hate are against this. But one of their big complaints is people don't integrate. Hello, here's an act that will enable people to integrate. Why are you not supporting it?
And sorry, just to, because I think you probably didn't really did that to remind me of Reform, but it's what happens when you have nothing but a plan to just be contrarian.
I'm not going to allow you to derail this conversation and start talking about reform. It was
No,
a
no, no, no,
throwaway
no.
point.
I'm just saying you can't base your whole existence of being contrarian when there
I
are,
said, I'm
so
not going
like
to
we
allow you to
said,
derail the
with this
conversation.
Renters' Rights Act, with the conversation around banning under-16s from social media, these are things that will actually help protect communities. But all they do is to say, no, we're not going to be against. And then, of course, 2 months down the line, you find out that they are. But you know
Yeah,
what?
but there's a point
Carry on.
that I want to make that I'm not going to allow you to distract me from. I think there's an elephant in the room. This even the new act does not solve. Landlords are legally required to check immigration status. And even with the new rights, many landlords are likely to choose that path of least resistance, which is they prefer to rent to those with British passports or with British sounding names. And I'll give an example, life example. When my family first moved here in 2021, before they came, because I came first, it was a hassle to rent. When it was time for us to get our mortgage, it was a hassle because of the passports. That is not taken care of. And when you consider that the government is still trying to sound very tough on immigration, which it's failing at, something that we have said so many times. There was a story in the Guardian yesterday about a poll that was conducted by More in Common, which showed that 67% of British people think that immigration is still rising, despite the
Even
fact
though
that
it's falling
it has been falling. Not just that it's falling,
to
it's
an
been falling for
all-time low.
3 years now
Mm-hmm.
consistently. Yet people still think so. whatever the government is doing in terms of perception is not working.
But you know, we've said that before. The government has a perception problem because
Well,
in
that's
other
their problem, not mine.
yeah, because on any other day, sorry, Chesa, but in any other universe, this would have been such a huge thing to campaign about. I mean, this would have been such because you're coming at it from an angle that the government hasn't even mentioned, which is that community cohesion, which is allowing people to put down roots, which is making sure that people can say, you know what, I've been a part of this community for X number of years because we're able to rent for longer. You
Yes.
know, so there is not just a perception problem, but a lack of communication problem. But I derail. Carry on.
I mean, there used to be something in the past, basically, or is it here or in Nigeria, basically rent to own. Um, and that has not been as popular. It's here. That has not been as popular for a long time. And
Well, because
now,
the housing stock has gone down. Thatcher
oh,
sold off everything, almost
well,
everything.
okay. Anyway, bottom line, back to what I was trying to say. Um, you you can ban bidding wars, you can ban no kids policies and all of that stuff, but unless you fix those rights to rent checks, there will still be some form of discrimination will still creep in.
Mm.
And a an African professional with a valid visa will still struggle to find a home because many landlords will say they don't want the hassle of verifying documents. So essentially, the new act fixes maybe tenancy, but it doesn't fix gatekeeping. And gatekeeping is a big elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Now, when you also consider another thing, places like Peckham, parts of Birmingham, places that are historically hubs of African communities, these places are gentrifying. Why are they gentrifying? Because rents are going higher and higher. Now, as rents are going higher and higher, it scatters communities. Our cultural model of raising children, we still lean into it takes a village to raise a child. If the community is dispersed, that model goes out the window. It puts more strain on families where both parents have to. So a lot of African families rely on auntie down the road to help with raising the kids, or one cousin, a cousin in quotes, who is from around same culture for childcare. If families or communities are broken apart or dispersed, that option goes out the window. Let's take London as an example. If because of high rents, increasing rents, a family moves, so they used to stay maybe a street in Peckham, used to have quite a number of Nigerians, and then suddenly this person has to move to Dulwich, this person has to move to Dartford, this person has to move to Norbury. They are now dispersed. You no longer have the option of, oh, okay, when the kids come back from school, daddy and mommy have to go to work, and then the kids can just go to Auntie Gina's house and sit down until daddy and mommy are back. It's no longer an option. So one of daddy or mommy will have to sacrifice. That increases poverty.
Mm.
So you see the little things that the act has not yet taken care of. But these things need to be taken care of if it's to make sense in the long term.
But the thing is, and you did allude to it, is that this may not, especially looking at the well, background checks, all just the right to rent, because there you can share a share code to show that you have a right to rent. However, I doubt that there's going to be any serious push to entrench that in the ad, because as you said, the blowback would be, hang on, I thought you were supposed to be getting rid of all these migrants. So it sadly is the politics that the government, I think, will look at and be like, you know what, maybe let's not push so much. But the other thing is how, in terms of community cohesion, I don't know, I'm trying to. I've lost my train of thought, but you know, I'll
McCarthy.
just come back. I'll just come back. But I think that is where there might be some sort of line drawn, just the politics of an art that some people might misconstrue to being helping migrants find more roots when there's a push for a ramping up of the hostile environment. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Well, I get where you're trying to. I get what you're trying to
So, and
talk
I'm not
about,
making
and
any
that's.
excuse. I'm not making any excuse for the government. But I'm just saying
I'm not
that,
saying that you're making an
yeah,
excuse. I say I get what you're trying to talk about. See, the government is between a rock and a hard place of its own making.
yeah.
There are certain things that they need to do if they are to foster integration or if they are to solve the housing crisis. But because they are committed to making giving the appearance of a hostile environment, they really can't do, or they can only
Much.
go halfway.
Mm.
You get, and so it's a case of it's only time that will tell whether this half bread is better than puff puff.
But you know, the and this goes back to what I said in our last episode, where I alluded to the rise or the possible rise of tech founders from the community, because short, you know, really this is a problem. And again, you know, if I go back to my experience as a local councillor here in Derby, I know that there are issues with people trying to find rental accommodation. Now, what I see happen is that people plug into that space because they know that the background check is a bit of a hassle, especially if you've just come over from wherever, let's say Nigeria, Kenya, wherever, and you can't prove that you've worked, that there's an income in the UK for, let's say, 3 months or whatever, because you've just come in. So you don't have that track record with which to give a future landlord some measure of confidence to rent to you. And of course, you are not on benefits. You have no access to benefits. So the future landlord is looking at you and saying, well, I don't know whether you're going to be able to pay next month's rent. So what people then do is that they become middlemen for some of these landlords, especially those who all they're thinking about is the
Essentially a
money.
black economy.
There's a black economy and it's going on, and there's a lot of it. You know, I know people who come and say, "Oh no, this has happened." I'm like, well, the council can't get involved. Because you have this agreement. It's a civil matter. However, what may then happen, I think, where the space then is for founders, especially tech founders, who can walk around the solution where they can, on behalf of these landlords, rent these houses and then pass on to people who have just come into the country and who have no long-term employment to prove that they can, but who may have the money. And I know people who, in fact, I've had conversations where people said, look, if we want to pay for 6 months at a stretch because we have the money to pay, we just don't have the track record to show because we've just come in. So there's an opportunity, I believe, for tech founders. So please, if you're a tech founder out there, there's a space in the rental market for you to look at.
This thing that you are hawking so aggressively. Maybe I think
Well, I'm not in that space, but I think I see an
no.
opportunity there.
Yeah,
And
so
you know, I'll
there
tell you. Sorry, Chede,
opportunity.
I'll tell you what I wanted to say is this. Yeah? I've had a few conversations with people who came in, either whose parents rather and relatives came in with the Windrush generation, and you know, so either from the Asian community during that time or the Caribbean community, who said because there was a lot of their parents and relatives couldn't rent because people wouldn't rent to them because of just the nature of the barefaced racism they faced during that time. What they then did was create
No blacks, no dogs, no Irish,
no
no
black,
blacks.
yeah. But what they then did was to create their own systems where they were able to get money together as communities and help people buy. So when in a situation where people are being either priced out of the rental space, or in the case of a tweet I saw the other day where someone, I think he's Nigerian, who's married or has a partner who is white. First of all, went on with his name to look for accommodation, couldn't get, but then his partner had offers. So when you have things like that, there's then a need for a community or a solution that understands the nuances of this community, that can say, right, this is a business that helps people in this community to get onto the renting ladder or the housing ladder. And of course, it's for a fee because it's a business. So that's just what I'm saying. For every problem, for every roadblock, there's a potential solution that can be sourced from within.
Inshallah.
So yes, I think that's it. It's a good thing that the government is reforming or handing a lot more power to renters, and the opportunity, as you said, for people to put down roots in communities is there. But then the question is, when people find it hard, or if people find it hard to put down these roots because of just the system and how the system operates, sometimes perhaps the best solutions or the best answers are those that you provide yourself.
I just saw something on social media that is going to I think I need to share my screen very briefly. Yeah. And it's ironic that I was looking at social media as we're talking of this is wonderful. Yeah. This is
Well,
wonderful.
I can't see the thing on the right. What's it saying?
No, it's just the caption. George Orwell, looking at 2026 so far, knows that the year is just 11 days old.
Yep. No, but it's crazy. 11 years old, and I
Sorry,
say 11 years,
11
11
days
days old. Dear Lord. Yeah.
Yeah, this is it has to be shared. My apologies for that, but I couldn't help myself.
The things we do on the Black Paper. Chetat sharing his all right, close it now. No one wants to see no one wants to see all the prompts you've been giving Grok.
No, I don't use Grok, please.
Grok, remove the least intelligent person. Grok, remove the bit. Oh my god, it's unending.
No, I don't use Grok.
Someone shares
I
something.
completely avoid that. So Grok is a very good example of AI gone wrong.
Yeah. No, but I think Musk wanted it that way because in his contrarian fever dream, he just wanted something that would wreck.
He's not contrarian. I think he has a particular worldview, and unfortunately he has the power and the means to pursue that view.
Well, true. All I'll say is, kids, don't do drugs, especially ketamine.
Kids don't do drugs. That's a great way to end this.
Let's do it next week.
Next week. Cheers.
Cheers.